I woke up and made what was either the smartest investment of my Roblox career or the digital equivalent of lighting a luxury car on fire. There was no middle ground. For years I've seen people argue about Roblox ads like they're discussing ancient mythology. One side swears ads are the greatest growth tool ever created. The other side says they're nothing more than an expensive donation to Roblox. Every single time somebody asks how to grow a game, a group of people magically appears saying, run ads. Nobody explains how much to spend. Nobody explains what the returns look like. Nobody explains if you're going to make your Robux back, or if you're about to experience financial heartbreak at 30 frames per second. So I figured somebody had to stop guessing and actually test it. Instead of throwing a couple hundred Robux at an ad and pretending it was some groundbreaking experiment, I decided to go completely overboard. 50,000 Robux. A number large enough to make my wallet start filing a missing persons report. Before clicking a single button, I had expectations, and they were all over the place. Part of me thought the game would explode overnight. Another part of me thought absolutely nothing would happen besides my account balance looking significantly more depressing. Either way, we were about to get answers. The first step was creating an advertisement that people might actually click. You'd be surprised how many Roblox ads look like they were made in Microsoft Paint during a power outage. Tiny unreadable text, blurry images, random arrows pointing nowhere, and colors so bright they could permanently damage your vision. If I'm spending 50,000 Robux, I'm not trusting my fate to a thumbnail that looks like a geometry homework assignment. So I spent time making something clean, colorful, and impossible to ignore, while still looking like it belonged on Roblox. Once everything was ready, I stared at the confirmation screen for way longer than I'd like to admit. Clicking that button felt like agreeing to terms and conditions without reading them. Except instead of accidentally giving away my soul, I was voluntarily deleting 50,000 Robux. Deep breath. Click. Gone instantly. No dramatic animation. No fireworks. Just a number disappearing from my balance faster than common sense during a Black Friday sale. At that point, there was nothing left to do except wait and watch the analytics. The first hour wasn't exactly encouraging. I refreshed the page every few minutes, like somebody checking lottery numbers. A handful of impressions, a couple clicks, tiny movement, nothing exciting. My confidence immediately started evaporating. Did I seriously spend 50,000 Robux to get the same amount of traffic as uploading a random tweet? Then the second hour rolled around and things slowly started picking up. Impressions began climbing. Clicks became more consistent. Players started joining. The game wasn't exploding yet, but there was finally enough activity to convince me Roblox hadn't accidentally sent my advertisement into another dimension. Watching analytics is strangely addictive. Every refresh gives your brain a tiny hit of optimism before reality punches you in the face 5 seconds later. Numbers go up. You celebrate. They stop moving. You assume the experiment has failed forever. Then they move again. Repeat until you've forgotten what happiness felt like before spreadsheets entered your life. After the first day, I finally had enough data to start making observations instead of emotional assumptions. The ad was definitely bringing people in. There wasn't any debate about that. The question shifted from, do ads work, to, are these players worth paying for? Because getting players isn't difficult if you're willing to spend infinite money. The real challenge is getting players who stick around instead of joining for 12 seconds, jumping 3 times, then disappearing into the Roblox void forever. Retention became the next thing I obsessed over. Were players leaving immediately? Were they playing multiple rounds? Were they inviting friends? Were they coming back the next day? These questions matter infinitely more than raw player count, because inflated numbers look great until you realize your game has the attention span of a goldfish with Wi-Fi access. Thankfully, the results started looking surprisingly decent. Players weren't instantly leaving. A good portion stayed around, explored, and actually interacted with the game. Some favorited it. Some joined the group. Others even started chatting with existing players. That's when I realized something important. Ads don't magically fix a bad game. They simply force people to look at it. If your game is boring, congratulations. You've successfully paid money to let thousands of people discover your game is boring. That's not marketing. That's expensive honesty. On the other hand, if your game already has a solid gameplay loop, decent progression, and enough polish to keep people entertained, ads become a loudspeaker instead of a life support machine. That's a massive difference people rarely mention. Throughout the experiment, I kept comparing organic traffic against paid traffic. Organic players often arrive because somebody recommended the game, they found it through search, or Roblox itself pushed it to them. Advertisement players arrive because an image convinced them to click. Those are two completely different mindsets. Organic players already have some level of interest. Advertisement players need convincing from the moment they load in. If the first 30 seconds disappoint them, they're gone before your soundtrack even reaches the chorus. That realization completely changed how I looked at onboarding. Spawn areas suddenly mattered more. Tutorials mattered more. Loading times mattered more. Every tiny annoyance became amplified because I had literally paid for each player walking through the front door. If they immediately walked back out, I paid for that too. Somewhere around the middle of the campaign, something interesting happened. Organic traffic started increasing alongside advertisement traffic. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Then the numbers kept climbing. More active players created more engagement. More engagement encouraged Roblox to recommend the game more often. More recommendations brought additional players who weren't even coming from advertisements anymore. It became a chain reaction. That's probably the biggest surprise of the entire experiment. The advertisement wasn't simply buying players. It was buying momentum. Momentum is one of those things that's almost impossible to measure until you suddenly have it. Empty games stay empty because nobody wants to join empty games. Busy games attract more players because humans naturally follow crowds. It's the same reason restaurants with long lines somehow convince people the food tastes better. Activity creates activity. Of course, not everything went perfectly. There were moments where performance dropped. Certain updates introduced bugs. A few players found exploits because apparently every online game has at least one person whose full-time hobby is breaking things developers never imagined could break. Watching paid traffic discover bugs felt like inviting thousands of guests over before realizing your roof leaks. Embarrassing doesn't even begin to describe it. Thankfully, most issues were patched quickly, but it reinforced another lesson. Never advertise a game you're still embarrassed to show people. Polish first, advertise second. Otherwise, you're paying people to beta test your mistakes. As more statistics rolled in, I started calculating everything imaginable. Cost per click, cost per player, average session length, retention percentages, favorites, group joins, returning users. At some point, I looked less like a YouTuber and more like somebody preparing quarterly financial reports for a Fortune 500 company. The funny part is that none of those numbers individually answered the question. You needed all of them together to understand whether the investment made sense. Looking only at clicks made the campaign seem incredible. Looking only at cost looked terrifying. Looking only at retention seemed promising. Every statistic told a different story until they were combined. Then the bigger picture became clear. Roblox advertisements aren't miracle workers. They're accelerators. Think of them like pouring gasoline into an engine. If the engine works, you'll move faster. If the engine is broken, congratulations, you've poured gasoline onto expensive garbage. The campaign also taught me how important creative testing really is. A different thumbnail, different text, different colors. Small changes produced wildly different click rates. Some advertisements people completely ignored. Others performed dramatically better, despite looking only slightly different. Human psychology is weird. Sometimes changing one word increases clicks. Sometimes changing one color decreases performance. Sometimes removing clutter does more than adding flashy effects. It became obvious why large companies spend millions testing advertisements. Tiny improvements become huge when enough people see them. One unexpected benefit was community feedback. New players weren't shy about sharing opinions. Some suggestions were genuinely brilliant. Others made me question whether Oxygen should require a subscription. But buried underneath the chaos were valuable improvements that made the game stronger overall. More players meant more perspectives. More perspectives meant better updates. In a strange way, the advertisements didn't simply buy traffic. They bought feedback. Toward the end of the experiment, I finally stopped refreshing analytics every 5 minutes because the results had stabilized. The campaign had done what it was going to do. No dramatic last-minute explosion. No catastrophic collapse. Just data. Beautiful, boring, incredibly useful data. Looking back at the full journey, I realized the biggest mistake people make with Roblox ads is expecting instant riches. They treat advertising like inserting coins into an arcade machine and expecting jackpots to start falling from the ceiling. That's not how any of this works. Advertising gives your game opportunities. Your game determines whether those opportunities become success or wasted Robux. If your first impression is weak, players disappear. If your gameplay isn't engaging, players disappear. If your servers barely function, players disappear. Ads don't solve those problems, they expose them faster. So after sacrificing 50,000 Robux to the algorithm gods, was it worth it? Surprisingly, yes, but with an asterisk the size of the moon. If your game already has strong fundamentals, advertisements absolutely have a place. They create visibility, build momentum, generate feedback, and kickstart growth in ways organic traffic sometimes struggles to accomplish alone. If your game isn't ready, save your Robux. Spend them improving the experience instead. Better gameplay consistently beats bigger advertising budgets. The final numbers ended up proving something I wasn't expecting. The advertisements worked. They weren't magic, they weren't scams, they weren't infinite money printers either. They were tools. Powerful tools, expensive tools, and tools that become dangerous when used without understanding what you're trying to accomplish. 50,000 Robux taught me more about game development, player psychology, marketing, retention, and first impressions than months of guessing ever could. My wallet definitely needed therapy afterward, but at least the experiment answered the question once and for all. Roblox ads work. The better question is whether your game is ready for them to.